And Melbourne is one of the most livable cities in the world. So this is how it looks, and we are very proud that, it's a very nice place. It's green, although we live in extremely harsh environment. So drought is something which we get every few years, and sometimes we get it for 14 years in a row. At the same time, population of Melbourne is growing at a very rapid rate. Predictions, as you heard Christian saying yesterday, no one knows whether we will have 8 million or 5 million. So basically, what we are not wanting to do, turn Melbourne into something like this in 50 years' time. We are building infrastructure, particularly water infrastructure, to support that growth in changing climate, and this is definitely not what we would like to see. What we would like to see is something called water-sensitive cities, which is obviously far more livable, and it's got lots of green infrastructure. Why? Because it's been shown that this sort of infrastructure can support much higher quality of life. But for this, you need water. So water is actually crucial for building livable cities, particularly in arid climates. So, if we are to plan this infrastructure for 50 plus years, because usually when you build new systems, you do it for more than just mandate of one government, although, as you know, it's not the case. They usually think just 4 years ahead. We have to think about high complexity, and some of the complexity that was addressed in the previous talk about interlinking of all these systems that we have in urban areas, but also high uncertainty. We don't have a clue, as I said, whether we are going to have 4 or 10 million people. There are different types of uncertainties. We as physical scientists usually deal with epistemic uncertainty. For example, I've been working, and a few of us as well here, on these sort of statistical uncertainties, where you actually look how good your model predict future or any behavior in nature. So all that you need to do to reduce this uncertainty is do a bit of more study. But we are talking actually here about ontologic uncertainties. These ontologic uncertainties are due to huge variabilities that future holds. Climate, population growth, mentioned economics, politics, which honestly drives the place, social trends, destructive technologies. These things cannot be predicted with any extra study, but we can explore it. And this is the word that I would like to use. So when we are thinking about investment for this future infrastructure and the shape, how it should look like, we are actually talking about exploration and trying to find, when it comes to resilience, which is again another thing that we are addressing here, is what are the least sensitive pathways of this development, which actually can do well for all these possible futures. So anyway, my passion at the moment, it used to be here, now it's there, because I believe that this is far more important for us engineers to master. So how do we explore these uncertainties? If you think where we are now, this is, for example, Melbourne 2015, and I showed you where we would like to see Melbourne in 2060. It's that sort of green, beautiful place. And we have to think about how to get there. But when we think how to get there, we have to think about all these drivers and trends. These are called scenarios, contextual scenarios. And if you think about combination of all these things, you create quite a large space of possible scenarios that you need to explore. At the same time, you have to think about strategies, how to get there to that vision I'm putting, this is Prince Charles, apparently, in a London tunnel. So you can build a big tunnel like they're building in London to deal with future flooding, future climate change, or you can think about softer technologies such as wetlands, biofilters, drain tanks and stuff, which may deal with this flooding issue. They can't deal at that level, but they can reduce definitely. Or non-structural options, policies, regulations, subsidies and stuff like that. So there are also strategies which can form quite a large possibilities for you. Another thing that you have to think about is all surprises, because we are saying we want to get there, we are now here, but on our path today, we can think about stuff, or should think about stuff like fire. For example, in Australia, our catchments are very fire prone. So if we have a catastrophic fire in our catchments, that makes a huge difference for our water supply. Definitely floods, that's clear. So this process, as you can see, to create possible to investigate these uncertainties is pretty much non-related to our physical sciences. It's more related to social sciences. And we're quite lucky to work with some social scientists who know how to actually talk to stakeholders and get this sort of set of data or information where scenarios are, where strategies are, what KPIs our system should meet, and so on and so forth. So we proposed relatively recently a framework how to do all this together. And so the framework starts by exploring future scenarios and strategies with stakeholders, and as I said, it's usually a social science job, and they come with this space of possible scenarios and options and KPIs and triggers when things have to be adopted. That then comes our job, which is modeling, which explores how infrastructure, including our networks, can develop in future for all these possible scenarios. So this is exploratory modeling, not the type of modeling we've been doing, at least my group been doing until now. And that modeling, I'll talk about that actually, that's the core of what we are doing, simulates lots of possible pathways of infrastructure development in a dynamic way. That's another key word, it's dynamic. So, because as you know, cities are not developed like I'm dreaming how Melbourne's going to look in 2060, and there is no change as you go. So you have constant change, and you have to implement those constant changes as you go. And then you have to evaluate this with your stakeholders, and at the end, hopefully get some nice option, which is least sensitive to all these possible uncertainties. So you may ask me why I'm talking today about all this when this is a workshop on networks. I'm doing this because you invited me here. Because when we met in Berlin, I didn't know I'm working on that topic, but now I learned that it's very relevant, and I'm learning a lot here, honestly, guys. Why? Because this approach, which is more bottom-up, that's how I see it, because we are trying to mimic what's happening in reality by exploring all these scenarios, should lead to actually simulation of how networks, water networks, develop in Melbourne, for example. So if you think this is the data that you've seen yesterday being shown, we do have data on, for example, drainage network, how it developed over last century in Melbourne. So I'm just clicking and showing you these are pipes which obviously been added. So if you go and look this is how it looks now. So these are every single pipe is here. So that's how our drainage network developed. So we are hoping using this approach, we will be able to simulate stimulate development of this network. The same would be for water supply, so there is no big difference really. You can use the same approach. And for that, we started developing this dance for water with Wolfgang's group. Was it 6 years ago? Anyway, it looks like forever. And we are nowhere near the end. We just started really, because it's kind of a tool which should be able to, it's a bottom-up approach, evaluate these networks, and not just networks, but more other water systems within cities, by first evolving our cities and basically building houses, and I'll talk about that a bit more in detail, and Christian, who will talk far more detail tomorrow. But then it's always done, obviously, through understanding performance, because every few years, obviously, people will react and do something else depending how well the system's working. For example, you may have drainage network in this area which is not doing a good job. You have flooding all the time. That's why you have to go and build more pipes or wetlands, retarding basins to stop the flooding. So naturally, this is how it's done in cycles. And that adaptation, that's the point when you kind of having a problem, like not enough water, has to actually lead to changing something in the system. So as you can see, this is a kind of a circular process which is managed by agents, by people, by society. So you have a very looped system which happens every few years with obviously homeowners, local councils, water authorities, and governments making decisions what to do at all levels. So it's a very complicated system which we are trying to model, but we are hoping if we model this for all sorts of possible future scenarios, we can find the least sensitive or the most robust pathways for future. So I'm going to talk a little bit about all these different modules that we are trying to develop. Having said that, Christian's going to talk in far more details tomorrow about a few of those. So how we develop our cities. We are thinking about all these scenarios and strategies, and we are using master planning. For example, city can get more dense or city can get more sprawl, and we run that. For example, this is high-level trends. We have documents, a plan, Melbourne or Victoria in future, which are telling us possible urban development types, societal change, climate change. So we can feed this into our model and basically think about where growth corridors are and future possible densification. Use urban development program. So we're not using SimCity, and honestly, it's Wolfgang Granov's group that they started all this, and I thought this is fabulous. But similar kind of algorithms to evolve our cities. This is obviously urban planning software and approaches, so honestly, we are just borrowing stuff. So if you look what we've done, for example, for Melbourne, actually what Christian's done for Melbourne, I do nothing, I just go around and gather money. So this is Melbourne. This is a catchment within Melbourne, somewhere here. I kind of live in this catchment, that's why. So if you look, zoom in into that, it looks like that. So streets and houses. So it goes down to that detail. So if you look in 2010, basically that's when we were doing this work. And then 2025, so it's more people are moving into the area, so we have densification, and more people are living in the area. So these tools can actually simulate this development, and it's not prediction, it's exploration. So we are exploring these possible futures. At the same time, as we are putting houses there, we are putting our water infrastructure. And this water infrastructure can go in all sorts of directions. You can have centralized or decentralized. So you can have, for example, bigger pipes, or you can have some of different systems, decentralized systems to deal with problems which arise. But also, you can have non-structural measures, such as financial incentives, water restrictions, or planning regulations. So your model or our model should be able to deal with all this stuff. So I'm going to show, if I know how basically this works for, again, Scotchman's Creek. So we had data from 1950, when this area was almost not developed at all. It was just few houses. And then the guys managed to simulate basically how the whole catchment got, how it got populated by houses, and then this is drainage network pipes. So that was done based on a master plan, which was simulated over 50 years roughly, and more or less then we assessed how well it fitted the reality. So you can see now why we are talking about networks. These are drainage networks. So evaluation was done bottom up using engineering guidelines, which obviously we use and Christian's going to talk far more about the details of the way we do this. The other thing was that it's not just about networks. We do have actually decentralized stormwater management systems. And another guy in my group was working actually on placing these decentralized systems, which, if you think at the end of the day, they are kind of grid, they are connected in lots of ways. And there are other, technical rules and also societal rules that govern their placement. So that was done as well. So, and we evaluated how good this is against the real data. It's called Urban Beats, and it's developed by Peter Bach. So that's where we were kind of, as you can say, at every time step, we can do this. But we do and must evaluate performance of these systems. And I won't talk a lot about that now, but I'm just saying we have a PhD student whose now work is to integrate all these tools, and it's a big job. It's a really complicated job, but we do need that because we want to see where flooding may be a problem, or where water quality may be a problem, or when water will run out. Why? Because these signals of how well it performs will actually give us a signal when we need to act, adopt, change. And that's the last kind of big module which we deal with. So how we are planning to do it, and this is still not developed, there is just some preliminary stuff. So we are using, I don't know whether you heard of tipping point theory. It's not something we developed, it's actually a very general theory used a lot all over the place. So if you have time here and flooding frequency there, and this is standard. For example, in Australia, we are saying all drainage systems should be designed to meet 1 in 5 year. All water stays in pipes for 1 in 5 year event. So its frequency, flooding frequency should be below that line. So let's say we are here now. Because of population increase, because of densification, and I showed you exactly what's happening in my area, more houses, everyone's putting pavement around. So you can expect with that sort of trend, and it happens honestly, that this hits above this standard. At that point, we need to act. And we usually act because people start complaining. And in that case, you would build more capacity in either centralized or decentralized way. And here it goes again. And again, not just for desertification, you will have that for capacity, for example, water supply. Water supply in Australia is hugely governed by climate, and we do have huge problems with climate. And we experienced this, for example, there were 14 years of drought, our dams were going down, and this was not flooding frequency, but storage of dams. When this hit around 20%, everyone started panicking, and they were saying, we should do something, we should put in something. So these are the trigger points the theory talks about, and we will try to model. As I said, this is future work. We haven't done a lot here. What we should also model is changing standard. And now, particularly you guys who are working on environmental standards, you'll know that this happens all the time. So we want to have scenarios. What if we actually change standard? And I know, for example, for urban drainage, stormwater management, we are changing standard, and it's going to create huge change. So that's another dynamic thing, because then our trigger point is here. It changes. So and now you understand about scenarios, because no one knows when this is happening, but you can actually do the game. This is, as I said, in very early, these are just ideas. So we have a PhD student who is here with you. Here. Work on this really, and he's been with us, 6 weeks or something? So I'm hoping that he learns a lot how to now develop more or less these possible pathways, because you remember, this is every time we have a trigger says we should do something. We can do so many things. We can do another big pipe, or we can do a storage, retention basin, detention. So there are all sorts of options for water supply. That would be stormwater harvesting as a small thing, or desalination as a big thing. So all these things can go in so many directions, but often some of the directions are actually prohibited by our decision made before that. So this is kind of decision possibilities, which, as you can see, look very much like network. So we would like to explore the most effective way of generating these future scenarios. The idea would be then, if we can evolve all these possible pathways for possible scenarios, to use some preliminary work which Christian's done and still writing the paper, and one day he will finish the paper, is to look, as I said, this is for Innsbruck that they've done, that you look all these possible scenarios, and you are looking all these possible adaptive solutions, and you say your KPI, or whichever indicator is number of flooding junctions in this case. Red means they failed for this scenario, for this strategy, and they actually did not fail that much for this strategy. So this strategy looks far more robust, because for all sorts of possible scenarios, it's actually doing pretty okay. So in a way, the whole notion of this third block is to definitely try to explore possible solutions over all these scenarios, seeking for solutions which are least sensitive to uncertainties. I will just talk one slide about this one, which we developed actually pretty much in the last few years. Who makes decision when and how to adopt? Who makes decision what to put in? So the guys been working on this agent-based approach with economics people. So we are developing this model which thinks about different level of decision making from household, that's a household agent, municipality agent, city council agent, developer agent, but more or less we have 3 levels of agents: household, more or less local city, and finally we have state. And these agents talk to each other and make decisions at the end of the day in which direction to go. So I don't want to talk about that, but we are using willingness to pay as a mechanism to make decisions what to do. So I went through this pretty quickly. Christian will tomorrow talk more about details of evolution of these networks, particularly focusing on drainage. We are using there lots of stuff that Innsbruck's been developing, so I hope Wolfgang will talk a bit about that. But at the end of the day, we are hoping to have, in who knows how many years, a framework which will allow us to investigate better, more robust ways of moving towards more sensitive city. That's it.